Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. You know, I've covered a ton of things on this channel concerning classic rock over the last 3 years. Some of it great news, covering brand new albums and releases by classic rock artists that are at least as good as the bulk of their heyday. I've also covered tales of yore of classic rock, and I will continue to do so on this channel in the future. But I've also covered some negative aspects that seem to be plaguing rock and roll these days. I've covered how certain bands rely on backing tracks and other bands rely on even lip syncing, Don Henley. I've covered how some bands are out there claiming to be what they aren't, high ticket prices, and I'm not a fan of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But tonight I get to cover some good news, and we're gonna cover the guess hows, the guess whys, the guess whats, and the guess who of the situation. See what I did there? All right, so first of all, let me make one thing clear. The Guess Who is definitely one of those rock bands from that classic rock era that make up part of the soundtrack of my youth. I had always enjoyed their hits on the radio, and I remember clearly when they released American Woman as a single, I got very interested in them and bought that album. Later, one of my best and dearest and oldest friends and I, both 16 years old, would be driving around in his Cutlass Supreme with cannibalized speakers mounted to the back of the back seats through the trunk and the prerequisite 8-track machine that was constantly playing either James Brown, Hector loved James Brown, or the Guess Who. And when I found out they were Canadian, that was even kind of a bonus to me because they were the first band that was not either from America or England that I really dug. I mean, they were so good that when their single American Woman came out, the B-side for that was No Sugar Tonight. I can guarantee you that both AM and FM radio stations at the time played No Sugar Tonight almost as much as they played American Woman. They were a band that approached songwriting much like the Beatles. I love that. Their songs had a structure, yet they didn't quite sound like the Beatles, but not too far off at the same time. Now, the band had two predominant writers, of course, Randy Bachman, riff master, Randy Bachman, later of Bachman Turner Overdrive, and Burton Cummings. Now, American Woman was credited to the entire band because the song came out of a jam session on a riff that Randy Bachman had developed right there on stage at a gig. He didn't want to forget it, so the band got in and jammed. Somebody was recording them. They asked for that recording, and they went to town writing it proper. And from that point on, folks, you know damn well that it was mainly Bachman and Burton Cummings that wrote that song, despite what it says as far as songwriting credits. I mean, these guys wrote most of their material, and certainly most of their charting material. And you couldn't pigeonhole this band into any particular style, and I just love it when a band has several kinds of subgenres that they cover within their material. Now, the last time I covered this band, I covered the lawsuit that was brought on by Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings late last year in 2023, and it has finally come to a head. In that video, I covered how both Bachman and Cummings were not happy about how the current lineup of the band that dares to call themselves the Guess Who have been getting away with using that name, and yet not a single one of them that are touring are from the original band. I covered how their original bass player, who was fired very early from the band, wanted to do a series of concerts and bill himself and other musicians as the Guess Who. He had the blessings of Bachman and Cummings on that, but he found out that the band had not trademarked the name. He quickly and selfishly trademarked that name and has been using it ever since as, well, basically the owner of the Guess Who. Now, it's true they brought back their drummer, and for a while they had the bass player and the drummer from the original Guess Who, but the bass player who owns the damn name retired, and just recently the drummer has retired from performing, and what we have are counterfeits up there claiming to be the Guess Who. Now, what really pissed me off was that this current lineup very underhandedly used streaming platforms and social media platforms to claim that they were the Guess Who. They had their photos plastered all over the place, and yet the material that they were playing, that they were known for, were written primarily by Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman. But then Burton Cummings turned the heat up even further by denying the band the ability to play at least the hits that he had written. As the songwriter, he had the right to do this, and folks, it cost him money. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about this supposed agreement between the two opposing parties. All right, so in order to get to the real bottom line of this whole situation, we have to turn our attention to an article that covers this settlement. Now, in this article, it starts off by saying it took almost a year and one extraordinarily drastic legal measure, but the Guess Who has settled on the argument over control of the band. Classic era frontman Burton Cummings and co-founding guitarist Randy Bachman filed suit on October 2023 against original members Jim Cale and Gary Peterson over false advertising claims. Cale and Peterson continued to tour as the Guess Who even after Bachman and then Cummings departed. Eventually, they both left the road too, even though fans were still allegedly given the impression they'd seen the creators of such radio favorites as American Woman, No Time, These Eyes, and Undone. In the initial lawsuit, Bachman and Cummings described the modern touring act as nothing more than a cover band. But Cummings subsequently took things one step further, terminating the performing rights for those hits. No one, including the current edition of the Guess Who, would be allowed to sing those songs, and royalty payments from concerts, TV, and movie placements and radio plays abruptly stopped. The move was both unprecedented and effective. Cummings went on to say it was painful, but we have done it indefinitely just to stop that fake band from taking our history. They took over streaming sites. They were using old photos of Randy and me. It gets me going even thinking about it, but that's over. It's a painful success. It cost lots of money and lawyers, and I gave up a lot of publishing money, but we finally won this terrible battle. Now, it concludes by saying details of this new settlement were not released, but Cummings and Bachman confirm that shared trademark rights have now been worked out, with Cummings making a final retort saying if there's going to be a group out there calling themselves the Guess Who, it's going to have the lead singer who wrote the songs and the guitarist who made the riffs. It's going to have Bachman and Cummings in it. Now, as many of you know, I have had a problem with bands that are out touring with one member, maybe two members, but a whole bunch of people who had nothing to do with creating the music that people are paying to go see. And at the top of that list, I'd have to say Foreigner has been my number one villain. But if there was a number two villain, it's always been the fake Guess Who. But where do you think they got the idea from, folks? They've been watching Foreigner themselves. They were trying to pull a fast one based on a fast one pulled decades ago by a former bass player from the Guess Who was such a malcontent he was fired from the band. But you see, this gets back to one of my concerns that I occasionally bring up on this channel, and that is the franchise bands out there and the franchise acts. It doesn't even have to be bands that are fake. How about shows with fake performers? The Avatar shows, ABBA, and now the upcoming Kiss Avatar show. That band we can't get rid of. They're going to be entertaining our great grandchildren if we're not careful. I mean, it's like Disney. Disney is nothing today like it was back in the day when we were all kids. It's a completely different entity, but they've got that brand. And up until now, so have these fake members of the fake Guess Who. Now, as far as the fate goes for those who have been touring as the Guess Who, I really don't care. This band was never more than a pretty good cover band, a band you could have seen at any decent-sized town's local tavern, right? And they tried to become this tribute entity and even pulled a fast one to become a franchise band. They self-anointed themselves as the Guess Who Part 2. But that leads to my question to the tribe. We always got room for dialogue here on the bottom line. I want to know if you guys agree with me. First of all, if you don't, give me reasons why this band should continue to be allowed to use the name or the moniker, the Guess Who. And if you do agree with me, but I didn't quite cover everything, put it down in the comments, all right? I want to hear from every single one of you. All right, that's the video for tonight, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. I always say this same little thing, don't I, at the end of my videos. But you know what? When you do that, that helps with channel recognition, all right? It even helps to increase a video's views, and I certainly appreciate that. All right. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't subbed to this thing we call the tribe, that's easy. This is what I always say as well, isn't it? All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, tap that top bell icon. You got to tap that thing or you won't be notified of all my future videos. All right, I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line. Only the bottom line as I see it, though, folks. The real bottom line for this channel is in the comments, and I want to hear from each and every one of you because it's in the comments where we prove that we are the tribe.